The sunlight was spilling across the Manhattan skyline, the glass towers glinting like polished silver. I stood by my apartment window, fingers wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, the steam brushing my face. The city buzzed below, but in here, it was quiet, just the faint, steady tick of the watch on my wrist. It wasn't flashy. No oversized face, no diamonds, no brand name screaming for attention. Just a simple, almost old-fashioned timepiece with a worn leather strap. And yet it always seemed to catch my cousin's eyes. I glanced at my phone. Another family group text, already lighting up with emojis and snarky comments. My cousin Madison had posted a picture from last night's dinner, me, mid-laugh, my wrist in full view. That thrift store watch again? She's loyal to the $20 special. They never missed a chance. Sometimes I ignored it. Sometimes I let the heat rise in my chest. Today, I just smirked. If only they knew. That watch wasn't just a watch. It was history, it was legacy, and it was worth more than every car they'd ever driven combined. $400,000, to be exact. And in a few hours, they were about to find out. The phone buzzed again, this time a direct message from Madison. Brunch today? My treat. Wear that watch. I could almost hear the laughter in her voice. I set my coffee down. Fine. I'd wear it. I was 19 when the mockery started. Back then, I was the poor cousin, the one who showed up to family barbecues in clearance rack jeans and shoes that had seen better days. My parents had split when I was 12, and my mom worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in our small Ohio apartment. Family gatherings at Aunt Lisa's place were the worst. She had this sprawling suburban home with manicured lawns, granite countertops, and cousins who wore designer sneakers before they could even drive. Madison and her younger brother, Tyler, always seemed to find a new way to point out what I didn't have. That summer afternoon, we were sitting on the back deck when Tyler leaned over, squinting at my wrist. Whoa, where'd you get that thing? A gas station. Madison burst out laughing, nearly spilling her iced tea. It looks like something from a yard sale. I laughed weakly, but my throat tightened. The watch was old, yes, but it wasn't junk. It had belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn, my mom's mom. Before she passed, she'd pressed it into my hand. Keep it safe, Anna, she whispered. It's more valuable than you realize. One day, you'll understand. At the time, I thought she meant emotionally valuable. I never took it off. Not because it matched my outfits, but because it made me feel like she was still with me. But that day on the deck, surrounded by smirking faces, it felt like a spotlight on my wrist. My cheeks burned. Aunt Lisa noticed. Sweetheart, you should treat yourself to something nice. You're working now, right? I wanted to shout that it was nice, that it was the most precious thing I owned. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I excused myself, retreating to the upstairs guest room, pretending I needed to call a friend. That night, I sat on the bed, tracing the smooth glass face of the watch with my thumb. My grandmother had always been the only one who saw me, not just the struggling teenager, but the woman I could become. And in that quiet moment, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let their small-mindedness define me. I wasn't going to spend my life proving them wrong. I was going to spend it building a life so solid, so untouchable, that I wouldn't need their approval at all. The next morning, I started researching night classes, internships, anything that could pull me out of the life they thought I was stuck in. The watch ticked softly on my wrist, steady and sure, like it knew the time for change had finally come. I moved to New York with 2 suitcases, $312 in my checking account, and that watch still strapped to my wrist. The city was louder, faster, and far less forgiving than I'd imagined. My first job was as a receptionist at a cramped law firm in Brooklyn. The hours were long, the pay was miserable, but I soaked up everything. How the attorneys negotiated, how they wrote contracts, how they carried themselves in meetings. At night, I took online classes in business administration. Weekends, I worked as a barista in a cafe in Soho, where I met the woman who would change my life. Her name was Margaret Blake, a regular customer, always in a tailored coat, with an air of quiet authority. One evening, she noticed my watch as I handed her a cappuccino. That's quite a piece, she said, tilting her head. I laughed. Most people think it's from a gas station. Margaret smiled faintly. They'd be very wrong. Do you know what you have? When I shook my head, she asked if she could take a closer look. She handled it like fine china, turning it over to read the engraving. This is a limited-run Patek Philippe from the 1950s. Mint condition. Anna, this could be worth hundreds of thousands. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. I told her it was my grandmother's, and Margaret's expression softened. She didn't tell me to sell it. She told me to protect it, insure it, and let it remind me what real value looks like. We struck up a friendship. She became my mentor, teaching me the ins and outs of real estate investment. At first, I was terrified. Numbers in the millions, legal jargon thicker than my coffee orders, but she had a way of making the impossible feel manageable. The first property I co-invested in was a rundown duplex in Queens. I scraped together my savings, took a chance, and spent nights painting walls, fixing cabinets, and learning how to negotiate with contractors. 6 months later, we sold it for double what we paid. From there, I built quietly, property after property, reinvesting every profit, living modestly. My social media showed coffee shops and walks in Central Park, not luxury cars or penthouses. My cousin still thought I was just getting by in the city, and I preferred it that way. In private, I insured the watch, kept it polished, and wore it only for myself. It became a quiet talisman. Whenever I faced a tough deal, I'd touch the side of the case and remember my grandmother's voice, more valuable than you realize. By the time I turned 28, I owned 12 rental properties across New York and New Jersey, held a 7-figure investment portfolio, and had the freedom to work on projects I actually cared about. No one in my family knew, not even my mom. It wasn't about hiding, it was about peace. They'd laughed at me when I had nothing. I wanted to see what they'd do when they realized I had everything. And that moment was coming sooner than I'd planned. Brunch was at a trendy rooftop spot in Tribeca, one of those places where the mimosas flow endlessly and the wait list is 3 weeks long. Madison had made the reservation, clearly with the intention of treating me, which in cousin language meant she'd remind me at least twice how expensive it was. I arrived a few minutes early, wearing a soft cream blouse, tailored navy trousers, and the watch. I'd even had it polished the day before, though to anyone else, it probably looked the same as it always did. Understated, vintage, unassuming. Madison and Tyler walked in together, both in designer sunglasses, dripping with the kind of curated casual style you only see in influencer ads. Madison air-kissed me. Anna. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you made it. And she glanced at my wrist with a smirk. The famous $20 watch makes another appearance. Tyler chuckled, sliding into his chair. I can't believe you still wear that thing. I smiled, letting the comment hang in the air like perfume. As we ordered, the conversation shifted from their vacations in Cabo to the insane prices of real estate. Madison rolled her eyes at one point. I swear, owning property in this city is impossible unless you marry into money. I sipped my coffee. I guess it depends on your strategy. Her eyebrow arched. Oh, and what's your strategy? I set my cup down gently, the watch catching a glint of sunlight. Buy low, renovate, sell high, repeat. They laughed, actual, out-loud laughter. Anna, that's cute, Madison said, her tone dripping with condescension. I let them finish before leaning forward. Do you know what this watch is? Tyler shrugged. Yeah, a thrift store special. Not quite. I unfastened the strap, placing it between us on the table. It's a Patek Philippe Ref 2499. First series. Only about a dozen were ever made in this condition. Last auction price for one like this? $400,000. Silence. Tyler blinked. Madison's mouth opened, then closed. I could almost hear their mental gears grinding. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. It belonged to Grandma Evelyn. She told me it was valuable. She didn't say how much. A few years ago, I had it appraised. Madison finally found her voice. 400,000? Give or take. Market's higher now. Could be worth more. I took a slow sip of coffee. but I'm not selling it. It's not about the money. They were staring at me like I just revealed I was royalty. I decided to keep going. I own 12 properties. Residential mostly. A couple commercial spaces. All in New York and New Jersey. Fully paid off. No loans. Their eyes widened in unison. I started with almost nothing. Worked 3 jobs. Learned the market. And I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to see who treated me with respect when they thought I had nothing. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Tyler cleared his throat. The waiter arrived with our plates, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift at the table. I picked up my fork. So, tell me again about how impossible it is to own property in this city. Neither of them answered. As the brunch went on, the dynamic had flipped entirely. They asked questions, polite, cautious questions about real estate, investments, networking tips. I answered with measured kindness, but I didn't hide the edge in my tone. When the check came, Madison reached for it out of habit. I slid my card across the table first. This one's on me. Her eyes flicked to the card, then back to my face. Thanks, Anna. The way she said my name told me she'd never look at me the same way again. And that was the point. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Madison again. This time, she called instead of texting, a rare occurrence in itself. Hey, Anna. I've been thinking about what you said at brunch, she began, her voice unusually measured. I wanted to apologize. I guess I didn't realize. I let her pause, waiting. Didn't realize what? That you'd built so much for yourself. That you're successful. She cleared her throat. I was wondering if maybe you could give me some advice. You know, on investing? The old me would have jumped at the chance, eager for approval. The new me understood the value of boundaries. I can, I said. But there are conditions. Conditions, she repeated, clearly caught off guard. First, no more belittling. About me, about anyone. You want to succeed? You start by respecting people, no matter where they're at. She was quiet for a beat. Okay, what else? Second, you actually have to put in the work. No shortcuts, no expecting me to hand you a magic formula. I'll guide you, but you'll do the heavy lifting. Another pause. Fair. And third, stop measuring your worth in handbags, vacations, and Instagram likes. Find something that matters, something that isn't about proving yourself to other people. That's where real wealth comes from. I could almost hear her shifting uncomfortably. That might take some getting used to. Then start today, I said, my tone calm but firm. She agreed, reluctantly, but she agreed. A week later, Tyler called. His approach was less apologetic, more businesslike. I hear you're the family real estate guru now. I want in. I gave him the same 3 conditions. He laughed at the third one until I told him I wasn't joking. The truth was I didn't mind helping them if they were willing to change. But I wasn't going to be the cousin who quietly absorbed their mockery while they coasted on appearances. The watch stayed on my wrist during every meeting, every coffee chat, every property walkthrough we did together. It became a silent reminder to them, and to me, of how wrong they'd been. Over time, I noticed small shifts. Madison's Instagram became less about champagne brunches and more about the small business she'd started, custom event planning. Tyler cut back on his luxury car leases and started taking night classes in finance. They weren't perfect, and neither was I. But the tone had changed. There was respect in their voices now, not pity or condescension. And for the first time in years, I actually enjoyed being around them. The power shift wasn't about making them feel small, it was about making sure I never felt small again. Spring arrived early that year. The cherry blossoms along Madison Square Park were already bursting with pink, scattering petals across the sidewalks like confetti. I was on my way to meet Madison and Tyler for coffee, this time at a little corner cafe, not a rooftop with a wait list. They were already there when I walked in. Madison waved me over, smiling, not the tight, polite smile she used to wear, but something warmer. Tyler stood to hug me. Small gestures, but they meant something. Over cappuccinos, Madison pulled out a binder. I booked my first corporate event, she said, eyes sparkling. It's not huge, but it's mine. Tyler chimed in, I just closed on my first investment property. Needs work, but I'm excited. I congratulated them both. And I meant it. It was strange seeing them like this. Not competing, not posturing. Just building. As we talked, I found my fingers brushing the watch on my wrist. I thought about Grandma Evelyn, about that afternoon years ago when I'd fled to the guest room with a lump in my throat. If she could see us now, I think she'd smile. After we parted ways, I took the long route home, walking past the old law firm where I'd once answered phones, past the coffee shop where I'd first met Margaret. The city felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. I unlocked my apartment, setting my bag down on the marble counter. Sunlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the gold of the watch's hands. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was proof that value isn't always visible, that worth doesn't need to be shouted to be real. I remembered the way Madison used to laugh at me, and how that same voice now asked me for advice. I remembered Tyler's smirk, replaced now with quiet respect. I wasn't naive. Not every relationship could be mended. But these were worth keeping. I glanced at the watch one more time, feeling the familiar weight on my wrist. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. More valuable than you realize. She'd been right. About the watch. About me. I smiled to myself, whispering under my breath, words that felt like both an ending and a beginning. I was never late. I was just right on time.